Alright, buckle up because this isn't your average ghost story. Forget creaky doors and flickering lights. We're diving into something way weirder, something that's got me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. Have you ever heard the stories about the Blackwood Mall? Not the urban legends about teenagers partying there and getting busted by the cops, but the other stories? The ones whispered in hushed tones, the ones that make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up? Yeah, those. Because I'm starting to think those whispers are a lot closer to the truth than anyone wants to admit. See, Blackwood Mall isn't just some rundown shopping center that went belly up when the big box stores moved in. Different. It's been sitting on the edge of town just outside of Crestwood, Ohio for almost 30 years now, abandoned. Most people my age, I'm Liam by the way and I'm 22, lived in Crestwood my whole life. We grew up hearing stories about it. Kids dared each other to sneak in, some claiming they saw ghosts, others just wanting to spray paint graffiti and feel rebellious. But the mall, it always felt heavier than just a place left to decay. It's this sprawling two-story behemoth, or at least it used to be. Back in its heyday, the late 80s and early 90s, it was the place to be. Anchor stores like Sears and JCPenney, a movie theater, a bustling food court, you name it, Blackwood Mall had it. My mom used to take me there all the time when I was little. I remember the bright, almost overwhelming lights, the smell of popcorn and pretzels, the echoing chatter of crowds. But then slowly stores started closing. First the smaller boutiques, then the bigger chains. By the early 2000s it was a ghost town. They officially closed it in 2005, boarded up the entrances and left it to rot. But here's the thing, even boarded up, Blackwood Mall held a strange allure. It was this massive, silent presence on the horizon, visible from certain parts of town. And the stories, they never really stopped. Instead they morphed, got darker. People started talking about strange sounds coming from inside at night, even though it was supposed to be empty. Shadows flickering in the boarded-up windows. And then there were the whispers of people going in and not coming back out. Of course, most people dismissed it as local folklore, teenage exaggeration, but I always felt a prickle of unease when I thought about it. I have this group of friends, Sarah, Mark, and Emily. We've known each other since high school, bonded over late-night movies and questionable life choices. Sarah, she's the practical one, always the voice of reason. Mark is the opposite, a total adrenaline junkie, always looking for the next thrill. And Emily is quiet, observant, almost unnervingly perceptive sometimes. Me, I'm somewhere in the middle, I guess. Curious but with a healthy dose of skepticism. It was Mark who first got the idea about the mall. We were hanging out at my place, bored, flipping through channels on TV. Mark, as usual, was restless. "Dude, we gotta do something," he groaned, tossing a crumpled soda can at the trash bin and missing spectacularly. "This town is dead," says the guy who just binge-watched 3 seasons of that zombie show. Sarah retorted from the armchair, not looking up from her book. "Hey, zombies are cool, but real life is boring. Remember Blackwood Mall?" Mark's eyes lit up with that mischievous glint I knew all too well. "Remember all those stories? We should check it out." Sarah scoffed. "Mark, seriously? That place is probably full of asbestos and rats. And cops. Trespassing is still a thing, you know? Come on, Sarah, live a little." Mark pleaded. "It'll be an adventure. Think about it, exploring a real abandoned mall. It'll be epic. We could even film it, put it on YouTube, get famous." Mark's ambition was always enthusiastic. Emily, who had been silently sketching in her notebook, finally spoke up. "I've heard things about Blackwood Mall," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just the usual stories. Weird things." We all turned to her. Emily wasn't one for sensationalism. If she said something was weird, it was usually worth paying attention to. "Like what kind of weird things?" I asked, leaning forward. Emily hesitated, chewing on her lip. "Just unsettling things. People saying the layout of the mall changes. That they hear voices when no one's there. That it feels wrong." "Wrong how?" Sarah pressed, finally looking up from her book, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Like, not just abandoned building wrong," Emily struggled to explain. "Like, reality wrong." That's when a little seed of unease planted itself in my mind. Reality wrong. That was a weird way to put it. But coming from Emily, it carried a certain weight. Mark, of course, was practically vibrating with excitement. Reality wrong. Even better. See, this is gonna be awesome. We're going to Blackwood Mall. Despite Sarah's protests and my own lingering skepticism, Mark's enthusiasm was infectious. And honestly, a part of me, a small, reckless part, was curious too. What was really going on inside that decaying monument to consumerism? Was there anything to these weird stories? So, that night, after the town had settled into its usual quiet slumber, we found ourselves standing in front of Blackwood Mall. It was even more imposing up close in the darkness. The boarded-up windows looked like vacant eyes staring out into the night. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the overgrown parking lot and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. Mark, naturally, had come prepared. He produced a pair of bolt cutters from his backpack with a flourish. "Operation Mall Crawl is a go," he announced, grinning. Sarah rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Emily just looked at the mall, her expression unreadable in the dim moonlight. I felt a knot of apprehension tighten in my stomach, but I pushed it down. This was just an abandoned building, right? Just a bit of urban exploration. Nothing to be scared of. Mark made quick work of the chain on one of the service entrances at the back of the mall. The metal shrieked in protest, echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. He pulled the door open, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. The air that wafted out was cold, stale, and carried a faint, musty odor like dust and decay. We hesitated at the threshold, flashlights in hand. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light, making it feel deeper, more impenetrable than it should have been. "Anyone else getting a bad vibe?" Sarah whispered, her voice tight. "Nah, just your imagination," Mark said, trying to sound braver than he probably felt. He stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. We followed, Emily bringing up the rear, her steps hesitant. The inside of the mall was different from what I remembered. Even in the darkness, I could tell things were off. The layout seemed subtly wrong. Hallways stretched longer than they should, corners turned at odd angles. It was like the mall was subtly warping, twisting in on itself. The silence was oppressive. Not just the absence of sound, but a thick, heavy silence that pressed in on your ears, making them ring. It was unsettling, unnatural. In a place this big, even abandoned, you'd expect some ambient noise, the creak of the building settling, the rustle of wind through broken windows, something. But there was nothing. Just silence. Our flashlights danced across the decaying remnants of the mall's former glory. Shattered storefronts, overturned mannequins lying like discarded dolls, faded posters peeling off the walls. It was a depressing sight, a testament to time and neglect. But it was more than just depressing. It was wrong. As we moved deeper into the mall, the feeling of unease intensified. The air grew colder and a strange, almost metallic scent hung in the air, faint but persistent. I kept getting the feeling we were being watched, that there were eyes on us in the darkness, even though we were clearly alone. Then we started hearing things. Faint sounds, barely audible at first, like whispers carried on the wind. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, just at the edge of hearing. We stopped, our flashlights sweeping nervously around. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered. "Hear what?" Mark asked, his voice a little shaky now. He was trying to play it cool, but I could see the apprehension in his eyes. "Whispering," I said. "Like voices." Sarah and Emily nodded slowly. They had heard it too. "Probably just the wind," Sarah said, trying to sound rational, but her voice lacked conviction. "Playing tricks with the acoustics in here." But there was no wind inside the mall. The air was still and heavy. And the whispers, they didn't sound like the wind. They sounded like voices, muttering, indistinct, just below the threshold of comprehension. As we continued to explore, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to swirl around us, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the empty storefronts. They were still indistinct, just a murmur, but there was something malicious in their tone. Something cold and unsettling. Then we started seeing things. Shadows flickering in our peripheral vision, darting movements at the edges of our flashlight beams. Glimpses of figures in the darkness, just for a split second, before they vanished. Every time we turned to look directly, there was nothing there. Just empty hallways and decaying storefronts. "Okay, this is starting to freak me out," Mark admitted, his bravado finally cracking. Maybe we should head back." "Agreed," Sarah said quickly, her voice tight with fear. "This place is seriously messed up." Even I was starting to feel a real sense of dread. The whispers, the shadows, the oppressive silence, the subtly shifting layout, it was all too much. This wasn't just an abandoned mall. Something was wrong here. Something deeply, fundamentally wrong. But Emily was different. She wasn't panicking like the rest of us. She was listening. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes wide and focused, as if she was trying to decipher the whispers, to understand what they were saying. "Wait," she said suddenly, holding up a hand. "Listen, I think they're saying something." We froze, holding our breath, straining to hear over the pounding of our own hearts. The whispers seemed to coalesce, to become slightly clearer, though still indistinct. It was like trying to understand a conversation in another room with the door closed. You could hear the murmur of voices but not the words themselves. But Emily, she seemed to be picking up something. Her brow furrowed, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Change?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "They're whispering about change, and walls, and beyond." "Beyond what?" I whispered back, my voice trembling. Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "I don't know, but it's not good. It doesn't feel good." Just then the lights flickered. Not the main lights, obviously those had been off for years. But the emergency lights, the dim red exit signs scattered throughout the mall. They had been faintly glowing before, barely noticeable in the darkness. But now they flickered, sputtered, and then went out completely. We were plunged into absolute darkness. Our flashlight beams became our only anchors in the void. The silence deepened, becoming even more oppressive if that was possible. And the whispers, they intensified, growing louder, more insistent, swirling around us like a malevolent wind. Panic flared in my chest. I fumbled for Sarah's hand, gripping it tightly. Mark was breathing heavily beside me, his flashlight beam jittering wildly. Emily stood frozen, her flashlight pointed down, illuminating only her feet. Okay, everyone calm down," I said, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. Just stay together. We can find our way back to the entrance." "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Something had shifted. The atmosphere in the mall had changed. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were voices. Still indistinct, but definitely voices. And they were closer now. Much closer. We started to move, slowly, cautiously, our flashlight beams cutting through the inky blackness. The layout of the mall seemed to have changed again. Hallways stretched in directions I didn't recognize, corners appeared where there shouldn't have been any. It was like the mall was actively trying to disorient us, to trap us within its decaying walls. Then the sound started. Not just whispers anymore. Scraping sounds like something dragging across the floor. Heavy, shuffling footsteps, echoing in the distance but getting closer. And something else. A low, guttural growl, deep and resonant, that vibrated in my chest. Fear, raw and primal, gripped me. This wasn't just an abandoned mall. This was something else. Something wrong. Something sinister. "Run!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Just run." We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and fled, our flashlights bouncing wildly, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. The scraping sounds and footsteps pursued us, growing louder, closer. The growling intensified, echoing through the darkness, laced with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. We ran blindly, desperately, through the twisting hallways, the shifting corridors, the ever-changing labyrinth of the Blackwood Mall. I could hear my friends panting behind me, their footsteps pounding on the decaying tile floor. The whispers swirled around us, taunting, mocking, growing louder, clearer. And then I heard them. For the first time, I understood the whispers. Not clearly, not as distinct words, but as impressions, as feelings, as raw, unfiltered thoughts projected directly into my mind. Change, walls, beyond, breaking, through, hungry hours. The thoughts were cold, alien, utterly terrifying. They were not human. They were something else. Something ancient, something hungry, something waiting. We burst through a doorway, hoping it was the service entrance, hoping it was escape. But it wasn't. It was another hallway, identical to the ones we had just fled. The mall had tricked us. It had led us deeper inside. Despair threatened to overwhelm me. We were trapped. Lost in this decaying labyrinth, hunted by something unseen, something wrong. That I saw it. At the end of the hallway, a doorway. But not a normal doorway. This one shimmered. It wasn't quite solid, not quite there. It looked like heat haze on asphalt, a distortion in the air, a glitch in reality. And through the shimmering doorway I could see something else. Not the decaying interior of the Blackwood Mall, but something else. Endless corridors stretching into infinity, bathed in a sickly yellow light. Spaces that shouldn't exist, geometries that defied logic, a sense of vast, empty, echoing wrongness. The backrooms. The whispers intensified, becoming a chorus, a cacophony of alien thought. Beyond, the walls, beyond. The scraping sounds and footsteps were right behind us now. The growling was deafening. We were cornered. Our flashlights illuminated the shimmering doorway, the only escape, the only beyond. Mark, his face pale with terror, pointed at the doorway. What is that?" he stammered. Emily, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and understanding, whispered, It's the change. It's what they were whispering about. The walls are breaking down. They're coming through." Sarah, ever practical even in the face of utter terror, grabbed my arm. "Liam, we have to go through it. It's our only chance." Go through it? Into that shimmering, distorted doorway? Into the unknown? Into the backrooms? It felt like madness, but staying here meant certain death. We could hear whatever was chasing us closing in. We could feel its presence, cold and hungry, just beyond the edge of our flashlight beams. Taking a deep breath, steeling myself against the overwhelming terror, I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's go." We didn't have time to think, to plan, to hesitate. We just ran. We plunged through the shimmering doorway into the unknown, into the beyond, leaving behind the familiar horror of the Blackwood Mall for something else. Something more sinister. Something that whispered of change, of walls breaking down, of a hunger that stretched beyond the confines of our reality. The last thing I saw as I stepped through the doorway was the darkness of the Blackwood Mall behind us, and in that darkness, two glowing red eyes watching us go. We not clipped. We escaped the mall. But I don't think we escaped what was in the mall. Because even now, weeks later, I can still hear the whispers. Faint, just at the edge of hearing, like the echo of a nightmare. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I think I see something flicker in my eyes. Something different. Something that came back with me from beyond the walls. They say the backrooms are just liminal spaces, places between places, endless hallways and empty rooms. But I'm starting to think there's something more than that. Something older, something darker, something changing. And I think Blackwood Mall wasn't just abandoned. I think it was opening. A gateway. A crack in the walls of reality. Have you ever felt it? That sense of unease in an abandoned place? That feeling that there's something more there than just dust and decay? Have you ever heard whispers in the silence? If you have, maybe you've brushed against the edge of something beyond. And maybe, just maybe, you should tell me about it. Because I have a feeling we're not alone in hearing these whispers. And I have a feeling they're only getting louder.